Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We are the community for all of the graduate schools around the world that specialize in international affairs, and we're particularly happy to be home to about 85% of the Pickering and Rangel and Payne Fellows. So we are always so delighted to have them as part of our community. And we're delighted to host for you all opportunities for you to learn more about how these fellowships may be the right fit for your students and how we will hopefully welcome them into the APSIA family down the line as well. APSIA is also the home to the Public and International Service Advisor Network, or PISA. So I want to give a special shout out to all of our PISA advisors who are here today. For those who are not familiar with the PISA network, I will ask my colleague to throw the PISA link in the chat so you can learn more about the efforts that we have to support undergraduate advisors on campuses across the US to help you all be even better champions for these issues on your campus. If you have any questions about APSIA or its work, I will throw my email in the chat as well. So please feel free to follow up with me. I'm also joined by my colleague, Brittany Chor, who will be happy to answer questions as well. But if you have any technical issues as we go through, feel free to send me a direct message and we'll do our best to get those taken care of. So now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, we are here for the main event. We are so delighted to welcome our colleagues Destiny and Nye from the fellowships team at Howard University's Bunch Center, who are home to some of these amazing signature programs that you are going to learn about here today. So with that, I'm delighted to turn the floor over, I think, Nye, to you to get started with our presentation. We'll have the presentation and then we'll invite folks to throw content into the chat. But if something just strikes you and you need to put it in the chat as we go, please feel free to do that and we will take all those questions towards the end. So with that, Nye, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Carmen, so much for that. I'll give my colleague Destiny Middlebrooks just a second to pull up the presentation there. So great. Well, in the interim, hello everyone. Hey, hi, hello. My name is Nigel Aline Jules, and I am the program manager for the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program, which is one of the great opportunities that I'm going to be discussing, going over and covering with you all today. So with that, I'm going to be discussing 3 fellowship opportunities, 2 with the U.S. Department of State, the first being the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Program, and the second being the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program, and then 1 fellowship with the U.S. Agency for International Development, and that is the Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program there. These are all, again, great opportunities. All 3 are administered by Howard University, where the 2 are sponsored. The Pickering and the Rangel are sponsored by the State Department, and the other USAID sponsored the Payne Fellowship Program. Destiny, could we go to the first slide, please? Excellent, excellent. Let's see, the slide is a little choppy here, but no worries. So our fellowship programs promote diversity and excellence in the U.S. Foreign Service, again, through the Foreign Service of the U.S. Department of State, or on the case of the Donald M. Payne Fellowship with USAID. The U.S. Diplomatic Corps, they work in over 270 posts worldwide in embassies and consulates around in various locations. And a lot of their work stems around conducting peace and prosperity and security, helping Americans, of course, overseas, management of large communities and embassies, and then also promoting dialogue exchanges and facilitating international trade and cooperation. So what's great about the fellowship programs, the Pickering, the Rangel, and the Donald M. Payne programs, that all 3 of these opportunities ultimately culminate with employment. Again, Pickering and Rangel for the U.S. Department of State, and then the Payne Fellowship with USAID So they'll be doing a lot of interesting work in the case of a foreign service officer in one of these respective areas, depending upon the fellowship program and the tracks that they go into after. Next slide, please. So first, I'd like to talk about the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Fellowship Program. What's most unique about the Rangel International Affairs Program, whereas here we're looking at the graduate components here, but the Rangel program also includes an undergraduate summer enrichment program, which is called the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program. Those who go through the summer enrichment program, which we call our scholars, they're invited to DC, where they do a 6-week intensive deep dive into the world of international affairs. So they'll do visits to various agencies to get an understanding of the work and the backstops there, and what they do. They'll also take 2 courses at Howard University, where which we will cover, and they can transfer back to their home university. And then they also, again, get a lot of exposure to the different agencies and other networking with Pickering, apologies there, networking with Pickering and Rangel Fellows. Give me 1 second.
Hi, all. We apologize for the technical difficulty, but as you saw in the chat, we do invite you, while we have a short break, to share your name, your institution, all of that good stuff, so we have a great sense of who is in this community with us. And I'm sure Nye will be back online to talk more about the Rangel International Affairs Fellowship, but I do want, as he noted, to put a plug in for the summer enrichment program for your students who are earlier in their journey. It's an amazing transformative opportunity for them to really get insights into how Washington is, to meet with lots of different communities, and to have some courses taken care of as part of that program. So both this and the fellowships themselves are great opportunities to introduce your students or to deepen your students' knowledge in international affairs. And with that, Nye, I hope that technical issues are sorted, and back to you.
Yes, they are. Thank you, Carmen, and thank you everyone for being patient with me. We learned some things during working through the pandemic, right? So, but yes, as Carmen was mentioning, the summer enrichment program is catered to those who are still, again, trying to learn a little bit more about the career paths in the world of international foreign affairs, right? So the eligibility for the Rangel SET program, you must be a US citizen, and you must have cumulative GPA of 3.2 and at least sophomore standing by the time 30 credit hours, essentially. So at least a sophomore standing at the time of the application deadline. Does that mean that seniors would not be able to apply? No, that does not mean that. They would have to be full-time still during that spring semester when that application deadline is. We haven't yet announced the upcoming cycle for the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program, but if you visit the rangelprogram.org and sign up to our news mailing list there, they'll communicate that announcement in advance, so that way you can start promoting that out to your students and advising them on that piece, so they can get that additional exposure into, again, the fellowships, as well as the organizations in Washington, D.C. That do a lot of interesting work. So with that, the second part of the Rangel International Affairs Program is the Graduate Fellowship. So the program includes up to $106,000 over 2 years for tuition, stipends, housing, and travel. And what that essentially works out to be is around $42,000 per year. With that, $24,000 is directly towards tuition, mandatory fees, and the other $18,000 is for personal stipends for the fellows to survive through the academic year. Then they receive two stipends, one for their domestic internship, which the Rangels do at Congress, and then the second for their overseas internship, which all Rangel, Pickering, and Payne fellows do overseas at an embassy or consulate, or in the Payne's case, also a USAID mission abroad there, which are two paid stipends amount up to around $7,200 to $7,600. So that makes that $106,000 over the course of the 2 years. All fellows receive orientation, mentorship, again, that professional development and support of entering the U.S. Foreign Service as well. And just like the summer enrichment program, again, eligibility includes being a U.S. citizen, cumulative 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale, with the difference being planning to enroll in a 2 years master's program for fall 2023. So the areas of relevancy for that master programs include anything from regional studies, MPAs and MPPs, so public administration, public policy degrees, international relations, international affairs types of programs, as well as business programs, MBAs, etc. For the Payne, there's also the addition of niche type of programs that have a more international development type of focus and component to it, right? Including agriculture. So things to consider there for the breadth of your students depending upon your institutions. The deadline for the Rangel Graduate Fellowship Program is the September 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We ask that to have in to be advising your students not to wait to that 11:59 p.m. day if they can, at least 48 hours beforehand. It never fails that the system will slow. So proper prior planning, they say, prevents future poor performances, right? So to do so early is always best. Next slide, please. So the 2023 fellowship timeline includes, again, the deadline being September 22, 2022. We will notify 90 finalists on November 1st. The interviews for the Rangel Graduate Fellowship will be conducted these are the final rounds interviews, November 16th and 17th. And then from there, 45 fellows will be selected and awarded the fellowship. The turnaround is really, really quick, within 24 hours. November 18th, they will receive their notification. They will have some time to, of course, sit with that decision, but promptly notify us of their acceptance, deferral, etc. All fellows will receive an orientation in Washington, D.C. in May 2023. So as you can see down here, we have a visual timeline for you to see the progression of the Rangel's fellows from applying to the fellowship and through entering A100, which would be the start of their foreign service career with the U.S. Department of State. So May, August 2023 is when they're doing that fellowship orientation and their congressional internship on the Hill. Then August and between August and May, they're having their first year of graduate school. Again, all fellows are required to attend a US-based institution, full-time 2 years master's program, again, in the area of relevancy to international affairs. So those programs I mentioned before were like regional areas, MPP, MPA, MBA, and others as well. There was a question about approximately how many will be awarded. We select 45 fellows for the Rangel and the Pickering fellowship programs. Then in June, August, they'll do their overseas internship at a US embassy or consulate. It's a great time for them to really get that exposure, their firsthand look at like what that life is like as a foreign service officer, both the lifestyle and the work, right? And then August to May is when they complete their second year of their graduate school and will graduate from with their master's and then enter into A100, which is again that introductory course for the U.S. Department of State, the starting of that foreign service career in that summer or that winter, depending upon the individual's circumstances and obligations, academic obligations. Next slide, please. So again, the sister fellowship, the sister program to the Rangel is the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship. It is the older of the two, and it also offers a lot of the same benefits, including that $106,000 over that 2 years, breaking that down to around $24,000 directly for tuition, mandatory fees, et cetera, $18,000 to the fellow directly for that support, and then the 2 stipends, the one for the domestic, and then the one for the overseas. Again, the only notable difference between the Rangel and the Pickering Fellowship Program is the domestic internship and the timing of the domestic internship, where in the previous slides, you noticed that, and I discussed that the Rangel program offers their congressional and complete their congressional internship after, before starting their first year of graduate school. The Pickering Fellows will do their domestic internship in between their first and second year of graduate school, as opposed to going overseas that year, like how the Rangels would be in between. So what does that mean? And also they'll be doing that directly with the U.S. Department of State in one of the offices or bureaus there. So African Affairs, Eurasian Affairs, NEA, all those different types of offices and bureaus within the Department of State. The Pickering Fellows would be working there for their domestic, whereas again, the Rangels are in one of the Senate offices or the committees on the Hill. Prior to starting graduate school. So that is the only notable difference there between the 2 fellowship programs, but that overseas experience is very much the same when they go again. So for the Pickerings, they'll be going after they complete their graduate school academic obligations. So once graduating from graduate school, they go into, they start their 10-week overseas internship. Upon completing that overseas internship is when they will enter into A100, which is typically for fall, winter for Pickering Fellows versus the summer, fall, as we noted in the earlier timeline with the Rangel Fellows. All fellows, again, receive mentoring, professional development, and support as they enter the foreign service, and then ultimately culminates again with that employment working for the U.S. Department of State. Eligibility is, again, very much the same. U.S. citizenship by the time of the application deadline, 3.2 GPA, and seeking to begin the graduate school in fall 2023 for the current open cycle. The deadline for Pickering is September 29th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So again, that prior planning is always look positively there. And what's great about the deadlines for the Rangel and Pickering, I'll note, especially for this year's cycles, that they're a week apart from each other. So in advising, there can be time, and the fellowships are similar as such that an applicant and advise, don't just apply to one, be sure to apply to both. Okay. We'll go to the next slide. So here's our 2023 fellowship timeline for the Pickering Fellowship. Our application opened July 5th, 2022. It's closing, oh, this is a typo here, closing September 29th, 2022. Our 90 finalists will be selected by and notified November 10th. And then our selection process is after the Rangels. So if they apply to both fellowships, and this is what makes this great here, if they're selected as a finalist for the Rangel Fellowship and interviewed and awarded the fellowship, they're notified prior to the Pickering final round, which means that they would already know if they received an opportunity or not. So they can make a decision to continue and go through a whole selection round with a completely different selection panel, but most typically accept keep the one that they were awarded. So the 90 finalists are selected November 10th, and then the selection process, again, that final round happens December 7th to the 9th. We'll notify the 45 fellows typically prior to winter break or the holiday break, which is this year, December 13th, 2022. Our fellows will do their orientation, which is a 1-week orientation in Washington, D.C. In June 2023. And then they'll have, after that 1-week orientation, again, they'll have that summer break prior to starting their graduate programs. Let's see, I'll stop there to answer some of these questions. I see that they were coming in from the chat regarding the state fellowship programs. So yes, the numbers every year fluctuate. Typically in the past, these are nationally competitive fellowship programs. We've had numbers close to the 1,200 during the intake phase that we would have to review for eligibility, right? So estimating, just taking from like last year's numbers, we are closer to that 860, 64, somewhere around there. So these are very high numbers there, and then we're narrowing those pieces down, the applicants down from that piece. But with that, both fellowship programs are selecting 90 finalists at the end of the day. And from that 90, we pull and we get the 45 after the final rounds of interviews. Okay. We have a question here. If the students are applying this fall, beginning a grad program next year, wouldn't they be rising seniors or alum at this point? Yes, yes, that is correct. So they would be either having to graduate from this past May, so that would make them alum. Alum are open to this. Rising seniors, meaning those starting their senior year this August. And then, yes. So rising seniors, again, those starting their senior year this August, and then those who have just graduated, so recent grads, and then even alum who have graduate degrees as well, who are looking for a change, be it career-wise or looking to get a second master's in an area of relevancy to the U.S. Department of State because they're interested in that type of work and they want to work for State Department or, in the case of Payne, USAID. Excellent. Okay. All right, I'm going to continue here. So moving on, thank you, Destiny. So USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Foreign Service Officers, they work on the front line. Again, similar to Rangel and Pickering, but the world's most pressing global challenges of our time. So think of everything from, again, injustice, the climate change, health, conflict, and poverty. A lot of their backstops and works include population, health, and nutrition, economists, agriculture, education, environmental officers, private enterprise, crisis stabilization, engineering, executive officer, contracting, programs officers, and even financial management officers. So here with the Payne Fellowship Program, you see that there's a variety of foreign service jobs, right, or tracks that the fellows for the Payne Fellowship can work into, and all surrounding international development, and again, impacting that change there. Destiny, can I get the next slide? Ooh, this slide is a little jumbled, very jumbled. So very similar to the Pickering and the Rangel Fellowship, the Donald M. Payne Fellowship also includes funding of up to $104,000 this year, which works out to be, oh wait, this number's a little wrong, yes, $104,000, which works out to be $22,000 per year for their tuition fees and $18,000 for their living stipends, which are issued directly to, again, their fellows. They have 2 summer internships first is a 10-week placement similar to the Rangel Fellowship on Capitol Hill. And the second is a 10-week overseas internship at a USAID mission overseas. So that's when they'll get their formative substantive work in one of those areas previously described on the other slide there. The Payne Fellowship Program is more closely modeled after the Rangel, you'll see, because after being awarded the fellowship and coming to Washington, D.C. for their 1-week internship, they'll start their domestic internship on the Hill as well, working in one of the various offices or committees on the Hill there. And ultimately, it culminates with employment in USAID's Foreign Service. Again, all of those meeting all of those program requirements applicable to USAID policy, et cetera. For eligibility, it's very similar. Again, all 3 fellowships have that US citizen requirement, the cumulative 3.2 GPA, and then seeking to begin graduate school for this year's cycle, fall 2023. Okay. For the 2023 cycle, the application has just opened. The application deadline for this year is November 4th, 2022, and they'll have their selection of finalists in December 2022, whereas their final round of interviews will actually be conducted in winter, January 2023. So that'll be when the interviews, the notifications, and decisions are typically entered. So the advice for all who are looking at these fellowship opportunities is that they must apply to graduate school separately from the fellowship opportunities. So they should, they don't have to know where they're going, but they should be aware that with the intention of applying to this fellowship and being awarded the fellowship, they will have to start graduate school in fall 2023. Justin, you can put that slide. Okay, great. And then I'll stop here and take any questions. I see there's some coming into the chat here. So
one of the questions is, because the fellowships seem very similar, yes. Folks hear that students should apply to both. So that was one question. And another one is, how distinguished are applicants expected to make their application? Is it normal for folks to submit the same materials to both applications? And then how distinguished, I guess, distinguish in terms of like distinguish between the 2 fellowships should they be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so we do. If you come across candidates or students, alum, who have a real interest in the type of work of, be it relevant to the Foreign Service of the Department of State or USAID, have them apply to all 3 fellowship programs. It's better, and what you'll notice too is that it's very easy. We want to make this process. These are, again, need-based and diversity-based type of fellowship programs and opportunities, right? So we don't want to have any limiters in regards to accessibility to the applications there. So definitely, if you come across a student who is saying, hey, I'm very interested, or I want to be a diplomat, but I don't know what type of diplomat, or I don't know anything, about the Foreign Service, but I'm here, I'm studying politics, or I have real interest in international development. Yes, have them apply to all 3. Regarding how distinguished the applicants should expect to take the applications as they're applying, well, again, do note that these are 3 distinct fellowship programs, whereas the obligations and the opportunities in regards to the benefits and the awards are very similar across those lines. There aren't blurred lines in regards to the actual applications. They have separate selection panels who look at each applicant differently, depending upon the missions, the goals for the cycle, right? This is, again, need-based. We're trying to increase the knowledge and the diversity for the Foreign Service of both USAID and the US Department of State. So with that, I would say being sure that, again, for the Payne Fellowship Program, it's very niche in regards to international development, right? So you want to make sure that the applicants are speaking to, and especially in their personal statements, in the essays associated there, they're speaking to their interest in international development. They're speaking to that work in the mission of USAID. Whereas on the Rangel and the Pickering side, the work of the State Department is more outward facing in regards to like that public diplomacy, that consular type of consular work, the management in regards to like business and trade policy, et cetera, there. So you really want to make sure that they're speaking to the mission, the needs of the U.S. Department of State. One of the things that we advise everyone to get really familiar with is the U.S. Department of State 13 dimensions, especially if they're going to be applying to Pickering and Rangel. That there is literally the guiding key, the checklist, if you will, in regards to what the State Department has outlined to be, a good fit for foreign service officers. So if an applicant can understand those exhibits and understands those 13 dimensions, it can definitely bode well for their success in applying to both Rangel and Pickering. And I would even go so far to venture doing the work as well with USAID in the Payne Fellowship Program. But again, being distinct in understanding the types of programs that they're applying for, whereas Rangel and Pickering, they're state, so the language may flow, may sound somewhat similar in those submissions. Just be sure that you're not submitting Rangel copy paste, like that you're, no one likes that. Again, and also the selection panels are completely separate. So just be with in that advisement cognizant of that piece. Let's see. Consider normal.
I want to underline that part. It's perfectly normal to submit applications to both, but as somebody who's read both, just encourage your kids to copy and paste. At least swap Rangel for Pickering. One of the next questions is whether students in a 4+1 program, so bachelor's, master's combined, are eligible or ineligible for these.
Yeah, so yes, they would be eligible for the program, but they would have to complete their master's program. So for the 2023 cycle, they would need to be graduating May 2023 if they're applying now, essentially. If they've already completed that program, so let's say they're alum now, yes, they would be eligible to apply to it. If the idea is to apply to the fellowships as they're completing their bachelor's requirement before beginning that master's component piece there, we would not be able to do that piece at the time. The fellowships aren't set up that way. Those who are currently obligated to complete a master's program would have to complete that first before applying to our fellowship program for and then to begin their second master's. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
If not, I'm sure Brenna will let us know.
Yes.
Is there an age limit to apply for the fellowships?
So where we do not have the fellowships do not have an age limit. I can actually say that there's nothing on our website that says you must be at minimum X, Y, and Z age to apply to these programs, right? You must have a bachelor's degree. So even if it is a 12-year-old in which there are many, actually, Howard had a 14-year-old admitted years ago when I was undergrad. But if they graduate with their bachelor's and they're interested in the work of the Foreign Service, again, they would have another 2 years, so at least they'll be what, 14, 16, to start their career as an FSO. The State Department, however, does have an age requirement in regards to that transition into the Foreign Service. If I'm not mistaken, Carmen, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that each requirement is around you cannot enter the Foreign Service after like 59.
59, yeah.
59 and a half. It's some weird, yes. So what that means, you can up to 57 and a half, let's say, if that's your age, because again, the fellowship is 2 years. And then you would have to transition into, so actually I would take it even a year back just to add a buffer there. Up to like around, what would that be, like 55, we would say, to add that buffer, 55, 56, to add that buffer there for you to transition into the Foreign Service there. So 8100, because the State Department has that cutoff at 59. So plan 2 to 3 years back.
Excellent. Now, you said that there are 45 Rangels, 45 Pickerings. How many Payne Fellows are selected?
Thank you so much. I completely overlooked the number of Payne Fellows. So the Payne Fellowship is awarding 15 fellows have awarded, 15 fellows this past year. They're looking to increase that number. So the expectation is that hopefully they will also get up to that 45 number, but we're growing.
Thank you. Folks are looking at the Pickering site, and they noted that in the tips section that students should express or display some knowledge of foreign policy in the interview. But the question on the table is how much of that should come out in the application and the personal statement itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the application is set up as such that we'll give that there's specific sections for the applicant to really enter any relevant information that they'd like to. So there's an accolade section where they can really speak to any of that research, any conferences and things like that that they've made up, that they've attended or done that is relevant to the work of the Foreign Service. And then also, again, in the personal statement, that is really that area. There's 2 statements. Let me say this for Pickering and Rangel. There are 2 statements that really have to be required for the application. That's the personal statement, and then the financial narrative. We won't really say it's an essay of sorts. It's really like a paragraph or 2 explaining the indication for need and support for your graduate studies and graduate program. Whereas the personal statement, again, harking back to it, should really be encompassing of your interests, your interest in the Foreign Service and the work of the U.S. Department of State, harking on the 13 dimensions, and then weaving in that narrative also of the work that you're already doing, showing those correlations, if that makes sense. Yes. So yes, yes, there should definitely there's areas, again, explicit areas on the application for them to, again, put those chronological dates and those opportunities and experiences that they've had relating to Foreign Service policy, et cetera. But the personal statement is also that other area where you can weave in that narrative there, showing the correlation to those interests in the readiness and the preparedness for graduate school.
And I want to echo that too. No one's going to quiz the students in the personal statement to like name all the NATO members, but through the personal statement, I should be able to see that you actually want to join the Foreign Service, that you see this as part of your journey. So it doesn't have, it's not a test of your foreign policy knowledge, but it is to reveal your interest in foreign policy work and lifestyle. So one of our other questions is, do the fellowships require an institutional endorsement? And if so, can you share some tips on completing that?
So the fellowships do require letters of recommendations from the applicants, and they can be asked that one be from a faculty member and the other be from a community member, but we do not require formal institutional endorsement similar to like Fulbright or Rhodes or anything like that. Thank you. Great question, by the way.
We had one more trying to sharpen the question about a 4+1 program. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend that students in a bachelor's master's program apply after their first year of grad school, which is also their senior year of undergrad? Or when would you suggest a 4+1 student apply?
I think it really ultimately depends on the applicant. If if their passions and if their interest is as such that, okay, they want to work for State Department or USAID, and that they know that this is the career for them, and they do not mind getting a second master's, applying during that first year of that graduate school, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that timing would work as such that they would finish their first degree, in my understanding, and then would be, if awarded during that year, eligible to start their second degree immediately after that summer. Is that the timeline understanding there? Or
I think
Carmen,
some of
did I get that
the
wrong?
trickiness is they're both undergraduate students, so would be treated like undergrads who were seniors in college and applying, but they're also current master students, and so would be treated like people who are currently in a master's program and then would need to get the second degree. So I think
Exactly.
that's part of where the hiccups in giving folks a clean answer lie.
Yeah. I think, yes, and thank you to that comment, for that explanation. So, it really depends on the applicant, the program, I guess, also would matter there. But ultimately, it's to be on the safer side of things. To finish that degree, that master's degree first, would always be the better bet. And then to apply to the fellowship programs with the intention of starting the second the following year.
Great. One of our colleagues supports McNair scholars who are interested in pursuing PhDs. Can you talk a little bit about the conditions for employment after the fellowship programs, and separately from that, whether there are funding opportunities for PhD study?
Yeah, so I'll answer the PhD studies first in regards to the fellowships. Unfortunately, at this time, we do not support the pursuit of PhDs through the Payne, Rangel, or Pickering fellowship programs. Regarding the transition in the for employment purposes, et cetera. So once the fellows are awarded the fellowship and they accept the fellowship, they go into an agreement with the U.S. In the case of Rangel and Pickering, an agreement with the U.S. Department of State. All in the case of Payne, USAID. All of the fellowships have 5-year service obligations to their respective agencies. So again, Rangel Pickering, State Department, Payne, USAID. What does that essentially mean? So that essentially means after the completion of the mandatory, the programmatic requirements and obligations, so the 2-year academic and professional development training, the overseas domestic internship, then they'll start their 5-year service obligation with their respective agency. That is that A100. So for State Department, the A100 piece would be that conversion of sorts, where that piece begins. Now, what does it look like to get there? So again, there's certain obligations, we mention them all the time. I'm sure some of you are perusing the website. All fellows must have and maintain 3 sets of clearances for the U.S. Department of State. And that'd be TS, top secret security clearance, suitability clearance, and med clearance, meaning for worldwide availability through the fellowship. So they must be able to be sent anywhere, essentially. As they matriculate through, essentially the clearance process starts actually as soon as they sign that agreement and return that agreement. That's really when State Department will work with the fellows to begin collecting all of their relevant information to begin those necessary checks, X, Y, and Z for their clearances. All of our fellows must have top TS clearance prior to doing their domestic internship. And we're very pleased to say that we have a very high rate of our fellows getting their clearances and meeting those obligations according for that transition to happen there. Same thing again on the Payne fellowship side. They must also have that TS and the medical clearance as well. So they'll before their overseas internships, they'll have their TS clearance, which will permit them to travel and do the types of work that they need to do at the U.S. missions and consulates abroad. Hopefully that answers the question there in regards to that transition and what that looks like through the fellowship program. If not, please feel free to ask or follow up.
Thanks, Nye. I'm going to combine a couple together, knowing that we only have about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the percentage of fellows who are seniors in undergrad, recent grads, getting their second master's? Generally, how does that breakdown fall out? And then slightly related to that, for alumni who are interested in applying, and I have my answer to this, but how do you advise them to get those academic letters of recommendation if they might have been out of school for a couple years? And then we'll pick up some of the rest of the one. Oh, and also related to that is essay prep with that personal statement or tips on personal statements.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the students who are coming out and looking and essentially what does that look like? I think that it's best for there's a number of ways that they can approach this. One, statistically, we get more students from undergrad. Again, the senior recent graduate population that tend to apply because they're working directly with a lot of you all fellowship advisors. They're getting notified about these opportunities early on. I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head to provide in regards to how many. I do know that it's compared to it's a pretty significant amount that are coming straight from undergraduate into the fellowship pipeline. Followed by that are the alumni, and the alumni being the first time grad student alumni, not the second master's alumni population. So these are early to mid-career professionals who are now circling back and saying, okay, I want to get a master's to get an MBA or an area of relevance, MPP, MPA, et cetera, and would like to work for the Foreign Service. They tend to be the second largest pool that we pull between all three of the fellowship programs. I would say somewhere those numbers are around like that 15 to 20%. I would say no more than that. And then the third would be those looking again the second masters. We get more of them now because things have changed. Whereas in the past, and this is in recent years, actually, like the pandemic years, prior to this, the fellowships, and this number is grown, actually, the second master's group. Prior to this, the fellowships didn't allow, once the second master's wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, it was a weight. It was a different, it weighted differently in the selection process. So it wasn't that you couldn't apply to it, but if you had a master's already, it was weighted differently against you. Now, State Department has since done away with that, and in the last 3 years, actually, we've noted an uptick in that number there. So I can follow back around with Carmen to pull some numbers between the last averages there, but typically we get the highest number, the highest concentration of applicants from that undergraduate population. In that ramble, Carmen, I completely forgot the.
It's all good. It's okay because I have a clarification anyway. So suggestions for alum to get their academic letters of rec, and then a question actually about the writing that finalists would do as part of the interview process was the second part. But I think broadly tips on letters of rec, personal statements during the application, and then the writing process during the finalist period.
Yes, and as far as recommendations for those alum looking for like faculty letters, et cetera, and especially if they're 5+ years removed, what we've typically advised to really find, it's not weighted against it, right? We're not saying, oh, we see that you're 5 years out. We understand, especially in higher education, faculty change, individuals retire, move on to other opportunities, et cetera. So we advise them to find someone, usually a supervisor or boss, they typically tend to be employed or working, who can really speak to both their professionalism, but also their preparedness for graduate school in regards to the work that they do, right? Carmen, do you have any additions?
I think encouraging your students for anything, grad school, fellowships, whatever, to pick a couple faculty to stay in touch with or to reconnect with is always a good tip, and not to do it at 11:59 on the night before the letter of rec is due. But I threw some other tips in the chat for folks. Now we have about 4 minutes left. So advice on personal statements and advice or insights into the writing exercise that's part of the finalists' endeavors.
Yes, so the writing exercise happens as part of the final round of interviews. One of the things that I would definitely advise is, if they haven't taken any courses on writing, or if they are like any writing intensive texts or courses, become familiar with, again, writing, grammar, the basic elements there. They'll receive prompts to choose from for the exercise. It is a timed exercise as well. And in the last 2 years, we've actually done it prompt monitored because we've been virtual due to the pandemic. So with that, they have no access to cellular devices or anything like that. So being able to clearly understand how to write and structure quickly. So again, those writing intensive courses would definitely bode well for their success. Anything in grammar, practicing outlines, I would definitely say, so they, again, can structure their arguments, would be very beneficial there. But the prompts do change every year. So that is one thing to note. So it's nothing that they can prepare for in regards to, oh, this is going to be the question. That piece is the one variable. Yes.
And I'll give a very brief insight as a former Pickering and Rangel committee member in terms of the personal statements from the applicants themselves. I think I would encourage you all to ask your students to think about what the fellowships are for and how they can bring those elements forward. So what are they for? They are to increase the diversity of the Foreign Service or USAID. So what elements does your student bring that are going to help them, whether it's geographic, racial, ethnic, gender identity, LGBTQI, all of those different pieces. The other piece, of course, is a career in the Foreign Service and the State Department. I've read many personal statements that do not use any of those words at any point in time in the essay. That is not a strong way for your student to stand out in a good way during the process. So really helping them think through what is the meaning of the fellowship, what's it for, what is the committee looking for, and how they can draw those elements. A call to Foreign Service, a call to USAID, those elements of contributing perspectives that may not already be present at the State Department, graduate school, for Rangel, life on the Hill. Those are the different pieces that can come forward in a personal statement for the application that I think help make it really strong. And hopefully I didn't give away any state secrets, Nye, and you can just deny everything I just said. We have about 2 minutes left. And so one last question for you, Nye, as our advisors think about students, they should steer towards the fellowships and perhaps channel their energy away from the fellowships. Are there any tips that you have for advisors in helping direct students in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I could say, one tip is definitely, again, harken back to the interest of the student, right? If you come across any students who may be on that, I'm not too sure, or trying to, well, first, those who are using or would see the fellowship as an opportunity for just the graduate degree, I would say definitely steer those individuals away, simply because, again, they're signing an agreement with 2 federal agencies, so they do have that hard 5-year service obligation. Again, there are circumstances that may come up, etc., where cases may be different. But again, this isn't a lifestyle, and this ultimately becomes individual's career. We've had one of our first Pickering fellows rise to the ranks of ambassador, senior principal deputy administrator, PDAS, oversees as well. So this is that type of, these are those types of programs. For those who have that interest and aren't too sure about the work of the Foreign Service, direct them here. Again, we have the summer enrichment program on the Rangel side that can really give them that additional exposure. We, throughout the fellowship program, we've had many who were politics majors, et cetera, but didn't really know what State Department or USAID did. And again, we provide the opportunity through the professional development that we provide and the mentoring that we match the fellows with, for them to really get that exposure over a 2-year time prior to starting their careers. One other tip I could say, any undergraduate major can apply as well. Yes, you hear the focus, the policy, the international development, et cetera, but don't let any of that deter students coming from other backgrounds as well. We've had someone who was she was a plant botanist major, and she was a lump student as well years ago. So yeah, so don't deter. These are wonderful opportunities. Again, we provide that training, that mentorship, in that the opportunity to really get that exposure into State Department throughout the fellowship once, if they're awarded that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nye. Thank you, Destiny, for putting this presentation together. Thank you to all of the advisors who joined us. And again, in a special way, thanks to all of the PISA advisors for continuing to bring these issues to your campuses and champion them among your students. We look forward to seeing all of you at future APSIA events and webinars, and we hope to see many fantastic applications come to the Pickering and Rangel Fellowship programs, and Payne as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.